Welcome, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. This is Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast. We're tuning in live from New York. I am Dayal, here with Achyuta Gopi and Kishore Chandra, and we're here to talk about spiritual matters. We discuss about how spiritual life intersects with our daily being of human. I love these two souls. We have a live studio audience here. We were just saying how this audience is from all over the world and country. We're here on the East Coast. We got Kimberly out there on the West Coast. Pasha just joined us and she's on the West Coast. Vidya's in South India. Lileshwari's in Brazil. Sydney's in East Texas. Kristen is in the Philippines. And Irenka, we have no idea where you are, but your image has pine trees, so I'm assuming that you are in Antarctica. Um, and we're here in Brooklyn. We're all in. Oh, you're in Queens, aren't you, Achyuta? She's in Queens, so we're representing. Um, how you guys doing this morning? It's so lovely seeing you guys.
I'm happy there's sunlight.
Ooh, it was cold yesterday, though.
Yeah. And deceptively so. Like that's New York. It'll look really cool outside and just if it's freezing your face. You can't feel anything.
Yeah, well, it's because when it's total cloudless and sunny, the heat escapes. It doesn't trap and stay in. That's why the sunniest, brightest days are the coldest because the heat doesn't trap.
Irenka is in Washington. She says the trees are from Washington Square Park, and she's in New York City.
They have trees like that in Washington Square
I
Park.
know. I'm like, I don't remember seeing trees like that in Washington Square Park.
Hmm.
Washington Square Park is quite small. I should have seen those trees.
I should have seen those trees as well.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna take your word for it, Irenka.
Now, if you tell me Central Park, there's a lot of things in Central Park. There's a snow leopard in Central Park. There's raccoons in Central Park,
There's a snow
which between
leopard
the
in
two,
Central
I didn't
Park.
know. Yeah, well, there is because they have the zoo there. So there's a big old snow leopard in there.
Oh,
And
wow.
at one point, yeah, on the news at one point they were like, "Oh, we have a raccoon problem." I was like, "You have a snow leopard. Why do we have a raccoon problem?"
Mm,
It's
yeah,
because the snow leopard is sequestered.
I got it. Sydney says 39 degrees here in East Texas. What's the temp there up in New York? Yesterday it was 20
I did not leave my
Oh,
apartment yesterday
Fahrenheit.
at
I
all.
have to leave my apartment to walk my dog.
okay. Well, okay. I left my apartment to go see Radha Govinda, so I win.
You win.
I win.
Yeah. I left my apartment to pick up my dog's poop.
Hey, that's Vaishnav Seva.
There you go.
You also win.
It's vegan poop. He's a vegan. It's vegan poop.
It actually, it doesn't matter for dogs.
It doesn't. They can eat
Yeah,
either way.
since it's because it's in their nature,
Yeah.
they are no
We
karma.
we do it for ourselves. We got him when he was a puppy, and dogs can be carnivorous or vegetarian. Cats cannot be. Cats need, if you
Yeah,
try to feed a cat vegan, they get really sickly. But dogs need,
and sometimes
if you
well,
start early when they're a puppy, and then their diet can adjust. And so, all right. So we're talking about poop this morning.
we're talking about evolutionary processes. Like if you start
Evolutionary,
early.
evolutionary processes. All right. Kishore, get us on track here, Kishore. Where are we going with this?
Well, I was just thinking, okay, one thought that came to mind when we were talking about Central Park and the snow leopards and the raccoons. I was watching a show recently that an interesting fact came up about how like scientists are still discovering new species in Central Park. Like there are still new species of animals being discovered specifically in Central Park. And it kind of just wowed me a little bit and made me feel very nice, but also very small in like the vastness of creation. And it's kind of like crazy. It's like, whoa, there are new species being discovered every day. And I don't know if this is the tangent that we want to go in, but this is where my mind's at right now. Just like really meditating on the fact that there is living soul inside of each and every being, you know? And I think that
Mm.
it's such a consciousness shift when we are able to see that for other people, that there's like a soul inside the other person, and then when we of course are able to apply that
Mm.
to animals. But I think it kind of connects to the topic we were talking about yesterday, because this ongoing topic, I feel like it's an ongoing topic we've been talking about: surrender and trusting in Krishna, and not going towards nihilism and cynicism, and like really believing that like actually Krishna is there, actually Krishna's going to catch me when I fall, actually it all does mean something. And I think a really beautiful way, a really beautiful and poignant way that bhakti philosophy and life really helps us do that is by seeing the miraculousness in everything that's around us. Because part of this bhakti practice is to see Krishna in everything and everywhere, and see, a beautiful Vaishnav spirit in Jiva, Doyal's dog, and see it as like, I'm doing a beautiful, seva here, like actually moving the consciousness into that space. It's really hard, and I'm gonna stop because I'm interested to hear what all of you have to say. It's really hard because, especially, let's not even talk about animals right now, but like on the level of people, something I've noticed: when you get in a conflict with somebody, the whole Vaishnav, you're a soul, you're a bhakti creation of Krishna, it just goes out the window, because all you see is the conflict, or all you see is like whatever, we start to identify that person with the supposed behavior, or with whatever we're criticizing in our mind is quote unquote wrong. And we lose
Mhm.
sight of the fact that, like, hey, they're just the spirit soul, just like I am, and they're going through this like crazy journey of karma to get to Krishna, just like I am. And it's very, I've been trying, but it is difficult, so I'm interested to hear your take or your tips on that. Like, how do we remember that?
Mm. I guess something I want to say.
Yeah.
Um, that on that note, because I thought I've been thinking about this for a while, and I've been wanting to bring it up as a subject regardless. And then you mentioned this idea of every living being a soul. Yes, 100%. And I think taking a step further is that helping that come to life is that every soul has a story. And I think that when we remove ourselves, that every living being has a story, it becomes depersonalized. Like they talk about, like that's how crimes are committed. That's how murders are committed. That's how people do heinous things, is when you dehumanize and you depersonalize something. And when you bring it was there was a book. Glennon Doyle read the book. She mentioned it one time. It was the name of a book. It was called Somebody's Daughter. And she's a feminist, and she's an activist and for women's rights, and this idea that every woman is someone's daughter, and I haven't read the book, but the concept of it is like, when the way that sometimes women are treated in society is so objectified and dehumanized, but when you look, it's like, oh, this is somebody's daughter, this is somebody's sister, this is somebody's mother, this is somebody's friend, and you start to look at things a little bit differently. And I think also so much the concept that I wanted to bring up was just this because I've been reading a lot. There's this person I've been following. Her name is Brooke. Africa Brooke is her Instagram name, and she's been speaking a lot about cancel culture and this idea of jumping onto mobs, and to like just hearing a little snippet of someone's story, one comment that somebody made, one action that can be totally taken out of context, or just sometimes you're catching somebody at a low moment. It may not even be like, oh, if you understood the context, it'd be justified. No, sometimes somebody does something that's not at all justifiable, but you just caught them at a low moment, which we all have, and then you divorce them from the whole story of their life, the whole story of the ups and the downs, the multiplexes of their being, that is them, that has a sincere part, a human part, needs and wants like all of us, and their low moments. And we just get rid of all of that, and we clump them into this comment or this action, and then we just like we discard people. And I think that so much of the compassionate side of seeing every living being as a soul is also understanding that every living being has a story of being trapped in the material world, encased in matter with material physical body and mental coverings of their body and mind that is conditioning them, and we're struggling. You know what I mean? What was it in the Gita? Krishna mentions every living entity struggling with the six senses, which include the mind. You know, and I think that that's also when we look at people as a spirit soul, it's like, oh, they're a beautiful spirit soul, and I love you, and you're such a pure soul, and we're connected as spirit souls. Like that's part of it, but it's also like Srila Prabhupada would look out and see compassion. Like we are all souls, but we're struggling in the material world. And it's kind of like, I don't use this in a self-deprecating way to ourselves also, but it's like we're all in a really pathetic situation. That we're just like groping through the bottom feeder realms of material nature, trying to make things work. And so I've been thinking about that a lot, and I've been wanting to kind of hear your guys' take on that idea of understanding people's, and the same thing as you're talking, Kishore, like in conflict. It's like, oh, I'm just like, you said this is like stepping out of the story and expanding my understanding of the story. Anyways, that's my little rant, but I've been thinking about that. That's my extension of the point that you made.
I'm just gonna make a quick point, and then I want to hear Achyuta.
We
And
want to hear you, Tuta.
my quick point is, has anyone ever canceled their parents? I totally canceled my parents. I was like over my parents as a teenager. I was just like, y'all don't get it. You don't get me. My parents are immigrants, and it was just like a very different whole situation. And I remember like one of my big turning points in life because I felt like my parents wronged me in many ways. Um, and we can get into that at another time. But if you actually look back at everything, it's like they kind of did actually, like they kind of did actually wrong me in many ways. But I think one of my biggest moments as an adult was when I was like in my late 20s, and I was like, you know what? Like they have a story, and like they came from some like intense stuff, and like they came from this
Mm,
crazy traditional culture, and like even though what they did was like really messed up, and like I didn't agree with it and like whatever, like I can kind of understand it from an objective point of view. Like I really really was like, I understand their suffering, and it actually brought me so much closer to them. It brought me so much closer to them. It created a lot of healing when I was able to
mm,
be like, you all are suffering just as much as I am suffering, just as much as everyone else is suffering, and you all are going through it, and you're just people, because I think like growing up, at least for me, it's like this
mm,
dehumanized kind of just like parents and like, parent figure, like they're just there. And as you get older, you're just like, wait, they're just people, and they have problems, and they're going
mm.
through it just as much as I'm going through it, and they tried their best, even though their best maybe wasn't like whatever, but they tried. And so yeah, that was a big moment for me. But I want to hear from you, Achyuta. I want to hear from you.
It's so funny. There were points, especially, and what you've said, Kishore, is completely true, and that's the. I'll start from the beginning. So I was kind of listening, and I found myself having all of these internal reactions, and then I was like, wait, why am I having all of these internal reactions? And it was almost like my whole everything in here went into like power save mode, started doing this things like I was like, wait, I was like, why am I doing this? Like what's happening? Why am I shrinking into myself? Why, like, we're in fight or
Mm,
flight mode. And so I was just like, I was like, why is this conversation triggering?
mm,
I think sometimes when we think about cancel culture and just the phrase somebody's daughter, I feel like it's like fun and games when it's in a book, and then you have like a little bit of a disconnect, right? There's like an intellectual concept of the book somebody's daughter, and then I think it becomes so different when it's a phrase that you've had to use again and again in your life. So you're like, oh yeah, somebody's daughter. I was like, this is not a new concept for me. Like it's something that I've personally said to people, devotees and non-spiritualists alike. And I was thinking about that, and I was just like, that's super interesting. Now, the point that you made, Kishore, that I want to like bring back out is not even just parents. I think it's important to realize that spiritualists, swamis, leaders, they're all just people. Devotees are just people. They happen to know about Krishna. And so I think usually sometimes, depending upon who the authority figure is or who it is, we start at, oh, but they're devotees or they're spiritualists. What if they're all just people who happen to know about Krishna? Krishna is the thing that uplifts if we're allowing it. But everybody is still people with a story. And I was talking about this with my brother recently. I was like, that even goes for celestials, demigods, certain people. They're actually just jivas with a job, and everybody's trying to do their job, whether it has to be deputed through lower agencies, whatever everybody's got a supervisor. Like everybody's just doing their job, which kind of lets us have this hopeful moment that, but the fact that we know about Krishna is something extraordinary. We shouldn't forget that that actually is something incredibly extraordinary. So then when we bring into account, like, but everybody has a story. I think sometimes, especially, and I never really thought about this as identifying as a woman or whatever, but I think as a woman especially, sometimes that being able to bring in somebody's story more often than not, and we even see this sometimes in Srimad Bhagavatam, bringing in somebody's story tends to divorce people from their sense of agency also. Does that make sense? So for the stronger people, in order to manipulate, they're able to divorce somebody from their story, and then you can dehumanize and manipulate. But for the weaker people who have been oppressed, then bringing in somebody's story, it's like understanding Jai and Vijay. It's like understanding all of the demons within spiritual life. And it's like, oh yeah, I could see how this is just human nature. A person could turn or manipulate. But for sometimes for the people who have lost their agency and then who haven't been fought for, returning that story to the person almost feels like a loss. That makes sense. It almost feels like a little bit of a defeat in that way. And so I think sometimes it becomes difficult to separate when had like the discrimination of who can we do that with versus no, for now you need to stand your ground. Like I feel like this was Arjuna's big moment. He's like, but Krishna, everybody over there has a story and their story's connected to mine. Look, that's my teacher, that's my so-and-so, that's my, and I feel like Krishna's like, yeah, but where are you just looking at certain parts of the story? I'm forgetting that they tried to strip your wife in an assembly of elders. Like, how do we forget that that was also part of the story? Like Krishna's like, don't forget the whole thing though. And I think that sometimes my optimistic views, I do that. I will bring in a story and rehumanize people almost to a fault. The compassion in me goes almost to a fault. And so I think that that whole thing was, I was also trying to like figure out what's this whole thing happening. And I was like, yeah, but is that somebody else taking away your agency, or is that me exercising compassion to a fault? And then that's where Krishna says, you're lamenting for things that are not necessary. So it's like we have to find this balance between all things, good and bad. Because we're like, oh, compassion is a great thing, but too much is also not great. Too little is not great. Like we have to find this divinely led balance in all things, even in the things that trigger us. And so I think that in that moment, I was like, okay, what's triggering me? Why? And has that been brought on by myself, or is this outside circumstances, or even both? So I think sometimes it's really important to remember the whole story, though. Like, there's that thing you can forgive, maybe not forget the whole thing. Like, so and I think that those are all parts of like playing this game between transcendentalism, transcending, and also self-preservation. And I
Yeah.
feel like Krishna is trying to help strike that balance all through Bhagavad Gita between transcendentalism and self-preservation.
Yeah. What you just shared in Kishore, you were smiling a lot as she was speaking. So I want to hear from you also. And I have a lot of just questions for you, Achuta, in terms of just elaborating what you were sharing and also asking like a little bit more about compassion to a fault. I think it's a very powerful concept that almost seems um, counterintuitive or contradictory, like compassion to a fault. Like we should just have compassion. But then, as you were saying, even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's saying you are lamenting for things not worthy of lamenting, and sometimes compassion can be misplaced or incomplete. And I'm just
Mhm.
because I've been following this person and a lot of her posts, this lady Brooke, I don't know her last name, on social media, and she wrote this post. I think it's her most recent one, and it said outrage can be a useful and powerful tool in the pursuit of change, but these days it's often misplaced and misdirected. And we all know that social media has become the perfect breeding ground for antisocial behavior cloaked in social justice speak and academic jargon. It's important, and I think this is the point that you were mentioning, Achuta. It's important that you filter everything presented to you through your own self-awareness, apply critical thinking, and remember that your outrage is not for rent. Use it wisely and on your terms. And so I almost feel like that's what Krishna was asking Arjuna to do in a sense, was like, you should be outraged at certain things, but direct it over here. And as you're saying, whatever happens, it's not that like, okay, everybody has a story, therefore nothing anybody does is wrong. And I shouldn't be upset about anything. And everyone's a spirit soul, everyone gets a pass. But filter it through your own self awareness, apply critical thinking, and bring context into the situation, and then you can navigate some of the complexities of these situations. So I just really really appreciate it, because it's easy to just go one side or the other. This is how it should be, that's how it should be, but it's like, no, things are very gray, and you just have to apply self-awareness and critical thinking to every situation rather than just whitewash and put everything in a box. It's easy to be like, up demon, up forgiven, up always forgive, always condemn. It's like, no, it's gray, and we don't like to deal with that, so we just kind of cancel as opposed to applying critical thinking and self-awareness. So I appreciated that a lot. And Kishore, you brought this whole topic up initially with the species in Central
Yes.
Park.
Yes. I don't know what species it was. I'll find out. But I'm very happy that the conversation is going
Yeah,
this way
well, those
because
species have a story.
this is what I like to talk about. These are the kinds of things I like to talk about.
Let's all
Um,
talk about triggers,
um,
guys.
I thought we were going to talk about the poop of these species because that's where we started, but we instead we got to something else
Our
more meat.
dear friend Jai Jagannath, he always says something really, really funny and very poignant, I think. And he says that when people who have spent a lifetime building up an identity, for identities have a particular role, they're a tool in a sense. And a lot of the times when people come from oppressed backgrounds or from a history of oppression societally, and they come to bhakti yoga, he always makes this joke that it's like, we have this very, clear understanding. You're not the body, you're not the soul, you're not the mind, you're something divine, like this whole thing. And he would always say, like, like when people of color or like when people who are, sexually different or like whatever it might be, like you spent so much time building up that identity as a defense mechanism. It's protection, actually, and then there's a little bit of like, I also felt that when I came, there's a little bit of like, wait a minute, so now you're just telling me that like everything's okay? Like everything's just okay and like I can just forget about all that and everything's just fine. And I remember I went through my moment of just like, yeah, everything is fine. Everything is just perfect. And then it's like, you quickly realize this point that Achyuta brought up. It's like, actually, in our spiritual society, people are also still just people, And I remember when speaking with Jaya about this, going through my own issues and stuff like that, it's like, devotees have their material side, right? They're in a material body, they're encased by material nature, and then they also have their spiritual side, right? However, that is something that we might not be necessarily engaging with at all times, right? More often than not, we're actually engaging with the material side, right? And that is something that I feel like really we have to understand. And something that I heard when you were speaking, DG, and when Nachuta was speaking, this word was coming up for me of like boundaries and how important they are to have and to understand them. And that it's not just all like, spirit souls just dancing in Goloka Vrindavan, and we're just, we're just transcended. It's like, obviously, that's the goal. That is the goal. But that's not where we're at. And I think we brought this up in one of the other podcasts, this famous Srila Prabhupada-ism, right? To be correctly situated or be rightly situated, right? And it's like, we have to know where we are. We have to like know our place. It's like, I am in this material world. I am in this material body. I have conditionings. I have prejudgments and discriminations, no matter how much I say that I don't, you know. If anyone's ever been in a relationship with someone who's from a different culture or a different language, like you realize that immediately. I'm in a relationship with someone from a different culture, well, similar culture, but different country. And one of the funniest things is that like if I'm speaking like this, it's like it took a while for him to be like, "Are you like mad at me?" And I'm just like, "No, I'm just from New York. Like this is just how we talk, Like if you don't talk like this in New York, it's like you're gonna get stepped on." And it's like it's such a moment where it's like, wow, we're like living in completely different realities, actually. It's like, and take it away from a cultural perspective, just our own story, this word that's coming up, our own story, like we're living inside of our story. And therefore, I really love that Achyuta brought up this point of like being compassionate almost to a fault, because that really resonated for me. Like I 100% understand what that means. And to just put it very plainly, what that means is like, I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm just going to be continuously judged and criticized for something about myself or my body or my whatever, because I'm just like, oh, I understand their story. Like, I understand where they're coming from. Like, actually, they grew up in a traditional like situation, whatever. And like, to go back to the parents situation, because I didn't open that up enough. But with my parents, there was a lot of forgiveness and such. And to give context to the story, I won't go into this so much, but my parents are from like a very traditional Hispanic South American country. And I'm like born in New York City and a gay man. And like, that doesn't really like go well together. And so even though there was a lot of forgiveness and stuff like that, there was definitely a moment where I had to be like, this is the boundary. And this is the level of respect that I need for this relationship to work. And if it's not there, then Hare Krishna, Hare, And it's like those kinds of things are very necessary, I feel like, with relationships, because we're not going to just be in a place and in a space where you're constantly being, and I really want to hear from you, Achyuta, because something that I know that happens to you, and I don't know if I'm opening a can of worms, but like I said, this is the stuff I like to talk about. I know that like on your Instagram, you get a lot you get a lot of stuff about a lot of things, about being a woman, about being a Black woman, about being a woman who practices bhakti, like all of this stuff, people telling you how to pronounce your name correctly, like all this crazy stuff. I'm always texting you about it, just like it's insane. So I really would love to hear from you about this, even though we're at time, but whatever.
We're out of
Yeah, no,
time.
it's such an interesting thing. And I was just telling my sister yesterday, like I was like, you get to a place where it's like certain words start to like already give you an allergic reaction. So the word foreigner right now is one of those words that's on my list of words that will cause hives. And I'm like, if I hear it one more time, I swear to God, one more time, somebody like, oh, I can't believe these foreign people, but they adopted our culture. I was like, look here, let me set one thing straight for you. I didn't have any other culture, right? I looked this way, but I was born a Vaishnav, and my parents were like, you're a Vaishnav first. So I was a Black Vaishnav kid who was a Vaishnav first, who went to school, a public school in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, who grew up learning Hanukkah songs at Christmas time, which we still celebrated. So like you can't like like if I hear it one more time. So yeah, it's like and because you spend so much time building up these, like you said, these identities, and you come along with all your stuff, you have words, and then they have words, and for everybody else it's just words, but the connotations for each person according to their story are so different. What I really love, and I'll like bring it nice full circle and we can continue on later. What I love is that how Srimad Bhagavatam actually shows how to deal with all of these different types of people. There is a there's a sage, and his name is Kashyapa, and he happens to have two wives who are like half sisters but also hate each other so much. And they get so angry, they both get in situations where they're like, I want to kill the other one's kids. And then the other one's like, but I want to kill her kids. And then this one man has to deal with both of these women, but how he speaks to them is completely different each time. And what he like, there's a thing like, first he'll come in and he'll see that something's wrong. And so then there's an actual acknowledgement that something is wrong, not even necessarily by looking at the woman, but looking at her surroundings. And so he's like, whoa, all the things that are normally like the way she likes them are not at all the way she likes them. Like, you, we okay? And I was like, see, smart man. Like he's learned through all his years of married life how to deal with these ladies. Like, take the cues. So read the room. So he's literally reading this room, going, okay, this doesn't look great. Are we at peace? Is our heart feeling peaceful? She's like, it's not. I can't deal. I need to fix this and kill her kids. And so he's like, well, maybe we should all remember that we're transcendental souls. Like, he starts giving this transcendental philosophy. And I know you and I, Doyle, we connected on a live post I made a long time ago, like a year ago. There's a time for
Yeah.
philosophy and there's a time for love, right? And
Mm.
so he starts giving all this philosophy, but he quickly sees, once again, reading the room, smart man, that it's not working. It's not connecting. It's not doing anything. She's just triggered. And so then what he does is he's like, well, let me tell you how to attain your goal. But he also like slips in some like spiritual advice so that while she's attaining this goal, the transcendental work happens on its own as she goes through this spiritual process with rules and regulations. And this is us with spirituality and religion. Everybody's like, why do we need rules and regulations? Because we're all triggered as hell. And we need to attain our goal, right? So we need to give the people, here's a goal, you'll get it, it's fine. And then you slip some things in so that the Lord from within starts doing that transcendental work that starts helping us to let go of some of that harsh armor. It's not going to do us any good, even if we were to attain our goal. Then he's like, okay, now like here, now I'll give you a year's time, you do whatever. And her determination works. But in both cases, he starts off with this philosophy. He's like, is it gonna work? Let me try it. No, not working. Then he backs off really quickly. And I really like how Srimad Bhagavatam is not just like, there's one way, you talk to one person one way and everybody that way. It's filled with colors and nuance. And this is how our relationship should be. This is how our journey through this life should be. So we should know that, of course, we come with all of our baggage and everybody else comes with their baggage. And it's up to us to actually still use discretion. I think discretion is one of the most important and powerful tools that we should never give up, especially on a spiritual journey.
Mm. Discretion is a tool we should never give up. I love that. That was going to be the title for today, along with We're All Triggered as Hell. Those are my two titles. I'm going to choose one of them.
That's right.
Kimberly, what are some takeaways? What are we walking away with? Thank you guys for putting all the comments in the chat. Sydney, Pasha, you guys, I love seeing you guys' participation. Kimberly, what do we got we're walking away with?
All right. So we can use our self-awareness and discretion to filter the full story, to bring context to the whole situation. And every living being is a soul and are struggling in the material world, developing stories all worthy of sharing and hearing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Remember where we are right now. We're going to pick up with a lot of these things as we go into tomorrow. And the other thing that was coming to mind is also just sharing, like, honoring stories means honoring our own story as well, which is a big part of it. And learning how to blend the stories together or set boundaries between them. So thank you guys so much. Really love all you guys. Thanks for our live audience. Thank you, Kishore and Achyuta. Thank you guys for listening out there. We love you guys. We look forward to seeing you again very soon. Tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.